Thank you, Rohit, for joining this podcast with me and Ashish. As I have explained that me and Ashish have started this initiative where we are sharing the learnings from our past experience through to people who are interested, people who are starting their career in technology, people who are starting their career in product management, and we are trying to give them insights into what goes into a successful career of 15 to 18 years, right? And you have been my college senior. Me and Rohit have done the Bachelor of Computer Science from the same college, MS University of Technology in Vadodara. You have been so nice to accept the invite and come on the podcast. So in today's like 40 to 50 minutes of time, we will have a set of questions for you in terms of learning from your experience. How did you start your career? How did you grow into your career? What are the leadership learnings that you have you want to share? If somebody is starting the career freshly, in that case, what are the things that they should consider? We will also talk about, how are you being so productive? How do you manage your work-life balance, and some of your thoughts on the emerging technology as well, right? So with that, we will start this session where I will ask you the first question in terms of, you have now spent close to 20 years into the technology and into different kind of technology companies. So my first question is that what initially drove you to the field of technology and architecture, and how did you navigate your early career days, Rohit?
Yeah. First of all, thanks to you, Pratham and Ashish, for inviting me. I'm I'm doing this for the first time with something external. I've done it internally, so thank you. Um, Long back when I was a kid, I think somewhere around 8 to 10 year old, I had this fascination that when you press the button, things happen. Right? I used to watch this robotic serials. I think I still remember that there's this robo where a small kid carries the remote and the rocket will launch. The robo will follow all the commands. So, I think most of the guys fall into such trap of robotic thing. So I developed a fascination for something called that. At that time, I didn't know that's called, electronics and electrical engineering and communication, which internally eventually evolved into computer science, right? So I guess as I grew up, I realized that that's my place to go into engineering. So I kind of picked that up. And as I started working on things on different projects in different companies, I started to self get little self-aware that the kind of things that I like is not just about coding or writing high performing code, but also more interested in understanding how the whole end-to-end things work, right? Because that's where the I used to get my fulfillment that I'm contributing to and understanding the whole system better. And slowly, as I grew in my career, I realized that architecture is what that's called. So it's not like I knew it all, and right in my childhood days I knew everything that what I want to be. It's just that as I took step forward, I learned that these are the things that I like, and hence that's how I developed my love for architecture and technology. Yeah.
Yes. Good, good. And I think you did the Bachelor of Computer Science and then you started working, or you did some masters and then you started working into technology.
So I actually did electronics and telecommunication. I think when I took this, so electronics, obviously during our times when you get high marks, whatever is the top stream, you take that irrespectively what's the future gonna be. So electronics and telecommunication was first, computer science was second.
Plus
So I
one.
actually ended up taking electronics and telecommunication. Eventually the table turned after 3 4 years and it
Exactly.
became com science. But nonetheless, even while doing electronics and telecommunication, we had this programming classes that we used to have, and I did it programming classes externally also. So that's how I
Nice.
actually ended up, getting interested into software engineering aspects also. Um, it's not that I did post graduation. Over a period of time, I thought that I want to be in management. So I did MBA from NMIMS, but I learned, management is not my cup of tea. So I stayed in the tech itself. So yeah.
By the I also did from the same college a few years back, and
How is it?
the feelings are mutual so far. Right. Right. Okay. So I think let's move further. Before this meeting, Rohit, I was talking through your profile on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
right? And I was just learning your career trajectory, and I found it very fascinating that from a developer to an architect to now, wearing different hats like CTO and etc. How did you adapt to these shifts actually? So sometimes it's become important that I take it to myself as well, being an engineer, then I become a leader, and then totally different world product management. It's create a lot of friction, right?
Yeah,
So I want
yeah.
to know your experience, like, how did you adapt yourself to these massive shifts, basically different personas?
So, so one definitely, the aspiration drives it, right? So all in our earlier days of career, we all want to be the top executive, right? So I always wanted to be a CTO. So obviously you aspire and then you work towards it. So when I was a developer, I used to believe, doing a good high performance code is pretty good, and that's how you go forward because CTO means highest ladder in the technology, which means that you have to be great at tech, right? So as a developer, you always work towards solving a problem that comes to you, right? But as you become senior, that alone is not good enough because you have to create a larger impact, right? At a higher
Correct.
role, the impact, the span at which you operate is very important. So, and given that I had an interest on end-to-end understanding and stuff, so I started to contribute on that and learn that architecture is my cup of tea. Now, obviously, when you're a developer, you have full control on things that you're working on, right? Other than the timelines. So the modules are there, the problem statement, you start coding, you do testing and all those things, which is pretty limited into its own silo, maybe a little bit of an integration testing and stuff. So that's, I feel now it's easy. Back then, probably that was one of the difficult one too. But as I grew into an architect, which doesn't have an authority directly, right, but has an influential role, we call it as influence without authority, right? So you do not have an
Yes.
authority of driving people, but you have to influence. And that is altogether a different ball game because now you have to earn the respect of the engineers for things that you say and they want to listen to you. And
Agreed.
right? Engineers are notorious. Good engineers will don't want to listen to you. They rather have 10 counter arguments. So it was initially difficult because you were a developer and you feel this is the right thing, but obviously the different developer feel this is the different thing is the right thing. So with initial struggle, but you knew that somewhere if you do not know, if you do not invest in convincing people, you cannot create a larger force to work on your ideas or your
Yeah.
thought process or your vision of what an architecture should be. And that kind of kept me going, saying that I have to be at it. I have to spend time and energy with almost every engineer, senior engineers, and share with them the whys and the whats of the world, right? Once you start sharing that, and once they start seeing the difference or the value you bring onto the table, you slowly get invited into different problem statements. And you know that now when you got invited, you're almost there to make that impact. But being an architect was still, I feel it's easy. But as you grow into like a VP or a CTO role, everybody thinks if you're CTO, you have a power, right? I felt the other way around, right? Because I was more hands-on kind of a guy who would like to get things done with the team. But as a CTO now, it's not in your hands. You have to
Right.
get it done by your people, right? Which means that you have to be very clear in transforming your vision or your approach towards how you want to do things to your directs. And they should be able to take it down to their directs, right? Which means that now you do not own something directly to drive it, but you own through driving through your people.
That's
And
right.
that largely means that you have to be very crisp and sharp in communication. Secondly, you have to be very aware of what metrics you want to optimize for so that the right culture gets created because now you're dealing with hundreds of humans and right, these engineers and humans, they will optimize for their own aspiration, their own needs. So if you do not define the right metrics, the right principles, the right approach mechanism, you may end up losing the culture that you want to create. So hence, you have to focus on the right this mix that I talked about to create the right culture. And the biggest part that's required, you to create the belief in you, right? Your directs and the
Important.
directs has to start believing in you on your vision and your culture and your aspiration, because they are the people who will then try to make your aspiration come true. So that's the difference that I felt. And obviously, I didn't know it all. I just, as things happened, I kind of learned it and figured it, made my own mistakes. But I'm happy that
Good point.
I was
Good
open
point.
with
I
that.
just want to ask maybe additionally. Yes, you mentioned that at that point, when you are the role where you are influencing people, there may be situations, and I have felt myself as well, and we have all felt it in some way, that there are two architects, maybe multiple architects. They are kind of advocating their own design, right? And there may be a slight situation of conflicts, like, okay, maybe you have to choose between multiple options, and maybe you are one of them. Maybe you also have your own idea of building certain thing in a certain way, right? So how did you handle those situations? Because those are pretty sensitive things sometimes, right? Because being an architect myself as well, I felt that you love your stuff, sort of thing,
Yeah.
right? And
So one
then
thing I would,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, go
you're
ahead.
right. So one thing I would say is an architect is a good architect who's self-aware. What I mean by that is
Oh, nice.
I know what I'm good at and I should know what I'm not good at, right? Because
Nice.
if I think I'm good at everything, I'm sure I'm going to screw up a lot at many places, right? So you, once you're aware and honest to yourself, right, what you do it
Nice.
is that you start identifying people where you are not as great, but others are. And you start to let them
Good
lead,
point.
and it's okay if they fail, right? Because nobody's right when you're doing something really complex and difficult. The best part is you do it parts in the POC. So for example, if you see every architecture you come up with, there is some challenge that you think if you're contesting somebody, you have a point to validate, right? You say, okay, let's do a POC on this aspect. If this works, then probably we are good. So instead of getting stuck with opinions, you say, okay, this part needs a POC, that part needs a POC. Stress test it, pressure test it. And if this goes through, then do a full blown development, because now you know that this was the core of the
More like
architecture
a
and you validated it.
fact-based approach. Let's use the
A little
data.
bit fact, little bit intuition, and little bit of self-awareness
Yeah,
that you're good at say databases, somebody else is good at distributed systems, and somebody is big data, and you know that they will do a good job, and obviously everybody has their own mistakes, and then you solve for it.
agreed.
So that's my
And
approach.
Rohit,
Different people have different.
no, I guess yeah, everybody would have their own approach to figure out what's the right path ahead. I think I'm just curious on one thing that you have worked in now multiple different industries. You have worked in one of the biggest companies on social media, then you joined one of the bigger company in advertisement. Now you're working in one of the biggest company in e-commerce across the world, right? How do you manage like transition between these two, this sort across the multiple industries that you have worked in, right? And like, what is your secret sauce to manage those transitions?
So as a tech, the technology doesn't change that often. The problem statement does, right? So adopting to the technology is not that big of a deal, because if you're talking about a KV store, it's just the use case may be different, but the KV store is going to have a similar property. A little bit here and there, like eventual consistency versus high consistency scenarios. But what is more important is understanding the business and the market that you operate on, right? So initially, yes, it's a learning curve, but I feel people like us who spend decent time with different people, with different problem statements, we're actually ready to understand business problem in a much better way. Because when people are talking about problem statements and they're talking about business problem statements or a product problem statements, right? You're constantly also analyzing that this problem statement matches to this kind of technology stack and this can be solved like this, right? If you invest enough time in understanding the domain from the experts, because what I used to do it is, for example, I did not really know mobile ads when I joined InMobi, right? What I did is I spent a lot of time with product and the business to say, hey, can you please explain me? And you understand the metrics, you understand how they run the business, you understand what is the operational aspects of it. Once you learn all those things, then you know that whatever you're building, it has to solve for these parts of the thing. So that's how you learn the business or the product aspect of it, and then you know that when you're building a platform, it is supposed to solve for this, right? So now when I joined Walmart, I definitely retail is very easy to understand per se, from a customer viewpoint. But the moment you go on the other side, it's very different, right? The whole fulfillment, supply chain, online, changing the experience. Now you have to spend time and energy and understand the problem statements and learn about the domain and the value creation. And once you focus on it, I think it becomes easy. And then to me, it largely feels like a common sense. You put me into anything other than say probably some rocket science, probably I will not get it. But otherwise, it's not that big of a deal to learn a new domain, provided you have the right people supporting you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, you mentioned that provided the right people supporting you, right? That's where I think I'm going to ask my next question is that you have managed good amount of people, high caliber people across some of the biggest companies in the world, right? What is your let's say framework to manage the teams? What is your framework to make sure that they align with you, align with the company goals, and grow together in the room? So how do you do that?
Yeah. So I always go with one mindset saying that, nobody is going to invest in you unless you offer something back to them. You have to put something on the table for them to be invested in you. So my first initial months is about what is it that I will have to offer to somebody that they will be invested to talk to me. Right. So first I figure that piece out, that which place I'm sitting in, what kind of work am I doing, how is this work gonna impact whom, and understand the problem statements that they might be looking to solve for. Because if you talk to them that they are not interested in, I think you'll not even get 5 minutes from them. Even if you get half an hour, they'll not listen to you, right? So the first thing that you have to do the homework is the person that you're meeting, what is their interest? What is they want to solve? What are they're trying to solve? And if you have nothing to talk about it, don't meet them, because if you meet them and you don't have it, they'll not give you the next half an hour ever, probably for at least not 6 months, right? So make sure there is something for them in your meet. And when you meet, they should get some hope in you, saying that if you are there, you'll bring some change, or yes, you will take one step forward to get this thing done. Right? That's the second piece that I feel is very important. Because in the larger organization, it's very easy to get lost. So unless you are at it, and month over month, week over week, you show the value that you're going to create. Sometimes it's not just the delivery. Sometimes it's just understand the concept and have them feel that you got the problem right, and you know the people whom to reach out eventually to solve for it. That itself could be a very big gain in a larger organization. Whereas in the smaller organization, like startups, doing the small wins are very important, right? Because in the startup world, things change every 2 weeks. So if you can't come back with something that they feel that you are going to do it, well, they would have moved on to something else, right? So the framework that I follow is get something for somebody to be interested in, because nobody cares about you. So you have to make sure that there is something that they will care about you. And once that's there, then don't do false promises. Once you make a promise, follow it through, deliver, show some small wins. Eventually, they lead into a larger wins, because the trust gets created when you deliver something and that they can touch and feel and say, okay, yes, this guy, he came with nobody and now he delivered something. I can trust this guy.
Absolutely. So, okay, let me ask something now. Let's change the topic a bit, right? Change the subject a bit, and I just share maybe some of my experience. Maybe when me and Pratham were in our previous company, he used to be my product manager, right? And I used to be a senior engineer or maybe lead architect sort of role, and we had this constant debate slash conflicts all the time. That he wanted, like, I want to build this, and I used to, no, this is a cool technology, I want to build this, right? So there's a standard engineer versus product mindset conflicts always, right? And this topic is pretty close to my heart. Still, I can relate myself where I was wrong actually when I used to be an engineer, right? So now since you are here, I want to just know your perspective that how important is to value product perspective, or maybe in general product management perspective, being an engineer role itself, how much weight does that carry? Okay, we are all excited about technology stuff and all those things, but what is your view? Like, okay, product is there for a reason, right? And there are companies who don't have a thick line between product management and engineering, but there are companies which has a very well defined structures, right? So what
Yeah,
is your
yeah.
thought process on that?
Sure. So, when people talk about product and engineering, feels like a Tom and Jerry kind of a chase where,
Exactly. And we were Tom and Jerry. We were known as Tom and Jerry on the floor.
exactly. So it just reminds me of that. But so I'll tell you my own journey, right? Initially, I was a hardcore tech, right? When I was in Yahoo, and I used to believe tech is everything. Uh, Tech can do everything. I don't know why we need product guys. And this is my honest confession. I used to believe strongly that tech can do anything. If you have a good tech, everything works. But as I start, so we built some platform where there was a user who would interact with our platform, and something, no matter how good the engineering was, there was no traction coming. That option was not happening. The engagement was not
Yes.
happening, though the product guy was involved. So we had a product and the UX step up. They took somewhere around a month or two. They came up with a very softer aspects of things, which like my technical mind would say, like, what's the big deal, right? But
Right.
they came back with the approach as to what needs to be optimized, what is the customer consumer behavior and all those things. And I think we released, I was like half-heartedly releasing, like, who really cares, right?
Yes.
But once we released, we saw almost like triple the engagement. People started to appreciate. They started to say, "Good tool." And at that time, that was my realization point that product management is more about a mental understanding the mental model of the customer. It's the softer aspect, and something can be as small as you'll feel weird, but as small as you know having a blue line somewhere, a left menu somewhere. And I'm not saying this is just the product manager who just do the visual part. I'm just kind of saying something as small as that. And the bigger aspect is, what do you really want the customer to be engaging with? Because that's a product aspect. Because if you have the right metric and the right behavior created for the consumer, then you create a long-term value, right? Not the short. Like for example, I'm sure TikTok was not just a tech game. It eventually was talk more tech. But if you see,
Yeah.
these are short videos. Somebody thought it's something gratifying to the people, right? And it's a great product. It turned out to be a great product, right? Like it became a wildfire. Now, those, if you ask for a tech guy, he'll say, what is it? It's a 6 minute video. I'll use this tech. I'll use that. I'll use streaming. But they completely missed the gratification part or the fun part that the customer would or the user would enjoy. So I feel I have a very high regard now for product guys because they definitely compliment me for something that I take it light and probably ignore. Now I have learned watching them saying that yes, what is more important? So like building a product is maybe say 60%.
Yeah.
But making that product get adopted, used, and grow, that rest of the 40% takes longer time than building the product, which is the 60% of the
Agreed.
time. So,
Agreed.
like tons of A/B tests, tons of metrics, small changes, identifying. So, I believe every engineer should listen to the product guy because that is a software aspect that you will never understand. The code cannot help you, understand that. Yeah.
So you want to add, Pratham?
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I agree on the partnership. I have spent time with Rohit in the previous organization as well. So I agree his viewpoint, and I think I have seen that kind of advice coming in his work as well. I was reporting into Rohit for a longer time when in the previous organization. So yes, I agree with Rohit's point of view, and I can see he has put that into practice as well.
Nice.
Mhm. I think I have one question, Rohit. We have worked together, and I think I was curious at that point in time as well, right? And this topic right now is, coming around really hot. Is that work-life balance, right? It's really, really hot topic, and everyone wants to talk about it. So, how do you maintain that work-life balance, and like, how do you stay productive? How do you make sure your teams are productive? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think post-COVID, world has become all about online meetings, right? For anything, everybody wants to get on Zoom or Teams or whatever, their own choice. What I feel is don't go into unnecessary meetings where it's not required. That's the first principle because you have to, meetings drain you, right? If you're on a meetings like 4 to 6 hours, I don't think so you can do anything, be it developer or anybody. Like you literally feel tired, right? And drained. So you're not going to do a great job. So first, avoid meetings where you're not required. Value your time, right? To be very clear about what you need to work on, what you're not required to work on, right? That somebody else will work on. That's very important to know that differentiation between, because the tendency that people have now, because everybody works like partially their office and home, everybody wants to be visible. So everybody keeps replying, even two-liners, right? Everybody wants to be heard and visible, which is a very bad culture that is getting created. Avoid that unnecessary trap of, because it has now become like a notification. Right? You got something, you have to reply something. Right? Not necessarily. You can take a pause and reply over a bit of time with some sensible. The third thing is, if you don't believe your personal life is important, you'll never have time for it. Right? So you have to believe that having some amount of personal time is actually going to make you more productive in your work. But if you continuously stay in your work, always replying or always like this instant messaging, right, Slack or Teams, like it's just pops up and everybody expects that in 2 minutes or 3 minutes you'll reply. And if you don't reply, you're not working, kind of a thing, right? You can always say that between these hours, you're not working and could be doing workout, you can be doing anything, spending time with your kids, your own, like cooking, whatever you like. They're so important because they rejuvenate you. And when you go into the next meeting, you know that instead of half an hour meeting, you can actually finish in 10 minutes. And sometimes I finish my meetings in less than 10 minutes, right? Because if you don't need half an hour, you don't have to be there on the half an hour, right? Just because you had that half an hour slot book. And many times I tell people, if it's 15 minutes, just book 15 minutes, right? We know that we'll be cutting it off in 15 minutes, right? So these are the small things that can help people
Yeah.
to save time, have time for themselves, and then be productive because otherwise not gonna be there. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Coming back on the, I think in the beginning section of this meeting, you mentioned that you strongly believe in building the right architecture, and it's very pretty, something is pretty close to your heart, right? What would be your advice around building massive scale enterprise systems, right? And in addition, like if you can influence your answer with the kind of importance of non-functional requirements, right? Because sometime in the process of building a functional requirement, how the cache will get debit and credit and sort of things, right? The non-functional aspects sometimes get diluted, and that's I being an engineer also, I can relate that. It's a responsibility of an architect to make sure that all those aspects which can allow your system to be scaled at a massive level, right? Those has to be considered. So how did you manage that in your career journey? Or maybe
Yeah.
if you can take some of the example, and of course without taking name of the product, but yeah, you can see
Yeah.
like what are the challenges you faced at that time, and then how you adjust those designs in between the journey.
Sure. So, one of the things that I keep arguing with my product partner in this case is there's nothing called non-function. And I
Nice.
usually ask, say you have an app, and if that app loads it in 5 seconds on the first page, are you okay? And they're like, no, how can it take 5 seconds? I said, okay, so it's a requirement. So yeah, it should load it in 300 milliseconds. Okay, so it's a requirement. It's not non-functional. It's a functional thing, right? Is so when we say cache, right? Obviously, it's a latency reduction, or sometimes the data which has to be consistent. So I ask, oh, if the data on this screen shows this, but 3 scenes later it shows this, is it okay? No. So consistency is a requirement. Yes, it is a requirement,
Nice,
right?
nice.
So when you add like latency, consistency, and these days in the distributed world, you have different regions. Like you can write somewhere, read somewhere, right? And people move across screens fast enough. It makes definitely technology take a lot of responsibility. But calling it as non-functional, I constantly argue with my product person. There's nothing that I'm going to call tech debt. Either it's a
Nice.
product or it's not a product. It's something that my customer is not going to experience it. My product doesn't believe in it. My business, I'm not going to have it. Because at the
Nice.
end, everything that I'm building is to fulfill somebody's objective, right? I do not have an objective to be resilient if nobody wants to be resilient, right? So it's not a non-functional requirement, is what I push for, right? And when people say, hey, I need high resiliency, which means that site should never go down or app should always work, it comes with the cost, right? It comes with the cost. In today's world on the cloud, things can go off, right? And you need to make sure that everything works. And for that, everything works is the cost goes up. There is extra effort. There's an extra code that you need to do, right? There's a bunch of complexity that kicks in. And therefore, it is never a non-functional according to me, right? Now,
Nice.
should I write a performing code? Yes. Why? Because if I don't, my cost goes up. Is higher cost acceptable to the business? No, because the P&L will talk about that. You cannot. If my revenue is increasing by say 5% year over year, with my cost increasing by 20%, is it okay? No, it's not okay. So how is it non-functional, right? Because somebody's not gonna cut check, right? So business gonna come cry, and so it has to be cost
Nice.
effective, right?
I think to our engineers audience in this community, I think you give a good point to the all the architects, engineers. So now they got a good insights to how to prioritize those non-functional requirements. This is also one standard debate topic, right? In between,
Yeah, it is a part of product. It is a part
it's
of
part of
product
product.
because, and what is product? The customer, whoever is the customer, is going to experience something. If that experience has to
Right.
be delightful and always working,
Yeah.
then everything that makes it work is the requirement.
Absolutely. Agreed with that. Yeah. Good insights.
Hmm. I think because you're talking about non-functional requirement engineers, I think I'm going to ask you the last question of the session, right? Which everyone talks about is Gen AI. Now Gen AI has started coding, ChatGPT started coding, giving competition to developers and stuff like that, right? So what do you think the future of this technology or how it is going to impact us? Like, or let's say how ChatGPT new models are coming up and they're actually as fluent in coding as human beings. So how do you see, where do you think technology is going? Will we need developers? Will we need product managers? How, according to you, how is that going to work out?
I think so. I definitely believe in Gen AI. I'm myself using Gen AI for the search that in my current organization, and we were the first one to release it in the market for search. Right. I think the time has come where it will revolutionize. It has already started revolutionizing a bunch of aspects, be it automation, coding, image, video. You have seen now. I can create any image with your photo, or I can create deepfake videos. Like there's so much that can happen. Yes, it does come with its own challenges as to what's real, what's authentic, whether it's created by humans or not. That said, that every time there's a disruption, there's going to be this, there's an equilibrium state that's going to kick in where all the right parties will get involved. But specific to your question, what will happen to developers and product managers? I think for the largest time, people have complained that they're getting bored with the same run-of-the-mill code, right? They always complain, right? And they always say, "Oh, we're not happy. I need good work." I think this is the time, right? The run-of-the-mill can be done by the Gen AI, and you focus on really solving the core of the problem because what Gen AI can only come up with what's been fed as data. And the kind of amount of code that it would actually gone over, it's probably the run of the mill. But the complex problem and the new ways of solving and the new algorithm is still in the hands of human because that brain cannot be replaced easy. Yes, it can replace for something that is mundane, repetitive. And that's what we don't want, right? That's what people have been complaining for. Similarly, the beat in product management, right? I don't know how many times product manager has really enjoyed writing those PRDs, right? Because they copy any which way from somewhere else and they just change the majority part of it or the core part of it, right? But the rest is all largely a copy paste, and I'm trivializing it, but I'm trying to make a point. Here's the chance to actually create a high quality PRDs and give those exact inputs so that you get your brain is about generating the right thing, right? Your brain is not about worrying about, hey, now yes, you shouldn't be actually getting excited about some repetitive things that you'll be doing because now this is the time where you challenge your brain and start doing the new things and get the fun out of it. And like same thing when the industrial revolution happened, people were ready about jobs and stuff. But look, the world grew like crazy, right? I believe the same thing is going to happen, that we'll come up with new things to be solved for because human needs are just going to expand with always the newer set of technologies and newer options available. So I feel, I only see it a very positive thing.
No, I also see it as a positive thing, right? You mentioned about product management, writing PRDs and stuff. I think I agree. I generally, how do I use GenAI is mostly that I try to divide my task into secondary and primary. Primary are the one which requires my input or my brain's input in those cases, right? Writing that part of PRD or the requirement document, which is the most needed part, right? I handle it myself. And there are
Exactly.
secondary tasks, right? And then I can give it to ChatGPT and generate the content and edit the content and then publish it as needed, right? So I
Is
generally
that
try to
junior
do that.
assistant
And
with you, right? Is that junior
yeah, kind
assistant
of.
with you, right? Like
Yeah.
do this, right?
Yeah, if you use it effectively, yes, exactly. Like a junior assistant with me, he can do a lot of things for me, and then I can decide, pick and choose, what needs
Sure.
to go where and stuff like that, right? So yeah, that's
Junior,
a really, really well good.
yeah,
Yeah,
a
go ahead,
junior
Ashish.
assistant who never get bored, who never get offended,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Exactly. And you will always generate a better code, at least for the run of the mill that you have done in the past, right? So,
Nice. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay, yeah. I think thank you, Rohit, for your time and thank you for
Thanks. Yeah.
all the valuable input that you have provided to me and Ashish. Right, and with this, I think I'm going to close the session.
thank you. Thank you, Ashish, and thank you,
Okay.
Pratham.
Thank you. Thank you, Rohit.